Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. I'm hoping you guys are all having a fantastic day. So today's upload we'll be talking about the potential for several snow systems, if you will. None of them are really looking significant at this point, but they're definitely something we'll have to watch for. And I will be going over the potential pattern that I talked about yesterday that was supposed to be snowy and active. It's still looking like that, but it's very far out, so that may change, may not change, and if it does change, which way does it change? So there's a lot of stuff to go over. If you guys enjoy these videos at any point, consider subscribing, consider checking out other videos, and if you are a returning viewer especially, consider liking the video. But anyone new, liking the video would be amazing. So thank you for that. Let's get into this. Alright, so let's start talking about this snow storm potential, if you will. There's going to be several systems. This is not going to be focused on just one system. I know that some people are talking about a nor'easter at this point. Again, that is still too early at this point. It's a possibility for sure, but I don't want to call it a whole video after that, as that is just unreasonable at this point, this far out. So let's start taking a look at this. GFS, what we see is a low pressure off the east coast. Again, earlier that was supposed to be thought to bring more snow onto the northeast. At this point, maybe just a few snow showers. And into southern Atlantic Canada, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, there could be a bit of snow out of this for sure. But again, even that, it seems to be more limited. What we see is a system, right, that is making its way currently onto the west coast. It is dropping a ton of snowfall across the west coast. If you're to take a look at the radar, which I don't have pulled up, but we would see a lot of warnings, advisories, watches, and again, rain, snow mixing through. This really dwindles as it moves through the plain or the mountains. The mountains start eating this up. Though it does survive, a bit of moisture does end up making its way through. Again, very measly, but it does start dragging moisture in from the Gulf of Mexico pretty quickly. We do see a bit of snow spinning around. Again, this is not moisture abundant. This is rather moisture starved, but there are going to be some potentially heavy snowfall rates with this system, and what we see is some light snow, light rain showers at around the Wednesday time frame, Tuesday into Wednesday, so really late tomorrow at around midnight into early Wednesday, and this could stick around for a while. Notice, just watch the South Dakota, Nebraska area, and Iowa. It just kind of spins there for a good several hours. So while that does look measly and almost like nothing, it definitely shouldn't go under the radar, as 3 to 4 inches is possible. While yes, that isn't really a significant system that will lead to a snow day or anything like that, it still will probably provide the roads with a lot of travel hazards, and the snowplows will probably have to be going on there. Depending again on how this falls, if there's more rain, that will be a more obviously wet scenario, but at this point it looks as if this model, the GFS, is mixing a little bit more rain in there than appropriate. Notice what we start seeing is a bit of precipitation across the southern United States into Louisiana, Arkansas, Texas. Quite a bit of rain, right? Quite a bit of snow to the north. It isn't a significant system still. And we see another system moving on to the northwest. Really, anywhere else, just cold, quiet, and dry. Could be cloudy, could be sunny, depending where. Again, closer to the system will be more cloudy, but as you move towards the north into Canada, it could be more of a pretty weak. Relatively dry. I mean, it's kind of rare to see such a dry pattern during the winter. I shouldn't say rare, but for this winter, it is kind of rare. We've seen very active storms. Have been small, some have been big, but this time around it looks as if definitely there will be a lull in activity. Notice this moves into the southern United States as a bit of rain, maybe some snow mixing it onto the northern fringes into Missouri and Arkansas. Again, this is the GFS. I think it's overestimating this rainfall. But again, that nor'easter potential starts right here, where it could drop definitely some snow across Carolina and Tennessee and Virginia, North Carolina, I should say. North Carolina, Tennessee, into portions of southern Virginia. But again, this doesn't seem to make a lot of snow into Maine state, Carolina, further eastward into Virginia. It transitions mainly over to rain, according to the GFS, which again, it may be a bit overdone the rainfall. Notice though, it keeps us well off the coast, not even close. I mean, okay, it's close enough to where this could still trek on, right? But with this right now, currently, it shows no precipitation on the northern side of this. Really little amounts, and unfortunately not supporting a snow system. It tracks it out into Atlantic Canada, where there it could develop into a pretty large system. But then, right after that one disappears, we have, again, if you saw that northwest system moving in, it is now across most of Colorado and Kansas to Oklahoma. This could definitely be significant. Some models are showing a bit of snow across the southwestern plains, actually quite a bit of snow. Now, as this kind of the GFS doesn't really show that, but what it shows is a lot of rain mixing in from the Gulf of Mexico, right? Even some snow into southern Arkansas, northern Louisiana. Potentially, you could see the cold air gets very far to the south. And notice that it really doesn't do much with this system across the Northeast either. It takes it closer than the first system, but still missing the United States. Now hitting Canada pretty hard with that, with some very heavy snow, but not much of the United States. However, if you were to take a look, say, at the midnight run of the GFS on Monday, so really this was right before I went to sleep, I saw this model run. And notice that what we saw is snow across the north. This low pressure took a way further northern track, right, with the GFS up into southern Canada, into the northeast. And, versus the model run that just came out a few hours ago or an hour ago, it takes it somewhere like this, completely off, right? So this is a pretty large track difference. It's a few hundred miles. And we could still see that kind of go back and forth, and whether it goes back and forth and which direction and how much is going to depend on, if whether or not this becomes a snow system. Now, you could see that it has remained relatively consistent, the GFS, with that first system, showing it pretty well off coast of the United States, but that second one is a bit more of concern. So let's take a look at the, for example, Canadian model. So this is the Canadian. I really like the Canadian. It does a very good job, relatively. Still say it's a bit worse than the GFS, but notice what it does is it develops that system right into Wednesday, tomorrow, across the plains. Bit of light snow again, kind of lingering for a few hours, if not almost a full day across certain portions in the central plains. What we see is that with this model, the Canadian shows more snow across Missouri and Arkansas rather than the GFS. Notice that could definitely bring in across southern Missouri, the Ozarks, a few inches, nothing too significant, but it could bring in anywhere from 1 to 5 inches. It's a large range, but that's what we have right now. And then as it moves across the south, again, a bit of snow into the Appalachians. Nothing really for Georgia or further south, but this model does bring a bit further out into North Carolina. We'll have to watch for that. And then notice that it takes it pretty well off the coast, but definitely closer than what the GFS does. So we'll have to still, keep an eye on that system, as it is fairly far out, 132 hours out. What we do see with the second system from the Canadian is, again, look at that. As I mentioned, the GFS did show snow here, but it was way less significant. The Canadian shows a much more increasing threat of snow. And you can see that it is rather significant if this were to occur. Again, not too far out, around a week, a bit less than a week, around 6 days out. So it's still fairly far out. But notice what we start seeing is more snow across Arkansas, Louisiana. Takes a more northward track with the Canadian, so that would obviously bring it maybe closer to that nor'easter potential. According to this model run of the Canadian, doesn't really do anything with it. It gives it the right track, but not the right dynamics, not the right moisture supplements, and really it doesn't produce a large nor'easter, and it kind of falls apart. It does produce a bit of light snow, but not heavy. And then you can see that the Canadian brings in more activity from the south, from Mexico, from the Pacific Ocean, so that definitely could be the next player in our next system. Very far out at this point. Right. Taking a look at another model, the Icon. This is a German model that is relatively okay. It has done a moderate job. Again, I wouldn't say it's better than the Canadian or the GFS by any means. Notice, though, what it does do is, again, has that system spinning quite expansively according to this model. It does bring in that precipitation across the Midwest, really the plains, into Tuesday and Wednesday. Doesn't really organize it well. It brings this system fairly far to the south. Again, not much snow with this, mainly rain, and it takes it off into the southeast. A bit of snow across North Carolina, into South Carolina, into Virginia, but again, keeps it pretty well off the coast and potentially starts developing that next system that the Canadian shows a significant threat with. The Icon, every 6 or 12 hours goes up to 180 hours, so let's just go further out with this one. Notice it keeps that system off the coast. It takes that second system very far to the south. At least the southern piece is pretty present and is pretty far to the south. Though again, it does start bringing it further up to the north, unlike the GFS, which keeps it further to the south. So that could be something to kind of watch for. Similar to more of what the Canadian does, rather than the GFS, the Icon. But again, the Icon has been jumping around quite a bit. High-res models do not go as far out to show that really this is whether it takes a coastal track or not, the first system, let alone the second one. So again, it's still relatively far out. But notice that this is a NAM, right? It shows a bit of activity across the Northeast, a bit of light snow across the Midwest. There is a line right now across central southern Wisconsin. It's stretching into Iowa that has this burst of snowfall that could, leave a dusting behind. So that's into tonight. But then again, into tomorrow night and Wednesday, we start seeing that system develop across the upper plains. You can see the NAM develops it pretty strongly. Again, that snowfall rate isn't too weak. It could be dropping possibly a few inches in a matter of 6 to 12 hours, but nothing too significant regardless. Notice it does increase the snow across Arkansas, Missouri, and Kansas, but it does start taking it pretty far to the south. Now, it doesn't go farther than this, so we don't know if it takes a coastal system across the Northeast, or does it take it just way out into the ocean, similar to what the GFS does. Really, most models show this first system off. I was thinking of the second one. They're getting confusing. They're almost very similar tracks. So again, the first system, the GFS and the Icon model, and the Canadian show taking a coastal or taking a track off into the ocean. It's really that second system that we're watching for. But even this one, there's still some potential of switching back onto the coast. Notice that if we were to take a look at the RGEM model, again, stops at that same time frame, 84 hours. There's quite a bit of moisture with this one again. More snow across Arkansas, Missouri. I'm just tracking this backwards this time around. Notice it's, again, that northern component is there, but it's pretty miserable, regardless if it, does produce, end up producing a bit of snow or not. It doesn't look too significant, but let's just take a look at the total snowfall regardless. Notice a few inches, again, the general track like this. And if this does end up overproducing, it could drop maybe up to, again, 1 to 5 inches across the Ozarks. That right there shows a foot. I don't, that's not most likely going to happen. But again, sometimes these systems are the ones that are very hard to predict. Regardless, let's take a look at the GFS parallel, which is kind of the upgraded version of the GFS. And notice what we see is we have that plain system, right? Quite a bit of moisture with this parallel model. Again, potentially some heavier snow across the Ozarks with this model run. And again, it keeps the system pretty well off the coast like most models do. So that's not really a threat for the Northeast, it seems, at this point. However, taking a glance at the Southern Plains, notice what we see. This is taking a track similar to what the Canadian does. It drops a lot of snow across Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Colorado. And again, Oklahoma City potentially seeing another snowstorm. So they've seen a very active season. And then notice as this tracks into the Southern Plains, or into the Southern United States, it doesn't start taking that coastal track like with the GFS model. This is the second one again. So about a week from now, again, it brings snow, lighter snow into the plains, into even Illinois, towards the Midwest, but it does start kind of weakening and dwindling, if you will, and ends up doing not much of anything. The GFS parallel does keep things active, though, in the longer range, which is definitely interesting. But up until, the medium range, it's just this system and this first one that seems to be more and more unanimously, based on all models, to kind of just take a drift off into the United States, or well off into the ocean. So that is that from this model. Let's take a look at the high-res European. So again, a very good model. I would say it's one of the better models, and it's keeping things probably the most boring, the European. So notice it keeps that system right. That snowfall is there, a bit of ice, even some heavier snow across Missouri, the Ozarks. So that's that, pretty well agreement. Again, it keeps it well off the coast. A bit of snow into Carolina and Virginia for sure. North Carolina and southern Carolina could see a bit as well. South Carolina, I keep saying Southern Carolina. South Carolina, northern South Carolina could also see a bit of ice out of that, but again, keeps it well off the coast. Not a nor'easter for the Northeast United States, maybe for southeastern Canada. However, we see that system right here again that all models are showing. Now again, the GFS showed a weaker version. The European does something similar, more of a weaker version, but further to the south. So, I mean, if you live across Texas, it's a stronger version in terms of snowfall. That could be interesting. Again, something to keep an eye on for. And it takes it well across the southern United States, notice, into Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas, Alabama. But with this model, it struggles to bring it onto the coast. It does bring some snow very far to the south, but it struggles to make a nor'easter out of that. Now, whether or not that trend will continue, it's too early to tell. We still have quite a bit of uncertainty about this one right here, this first one. And again, that one's looking more and more to be less significant across the Northeast. Maybe a bit of snow across these locations, something to watch for as this could overproduce. But again, this system could still, well, take a track like the Canadian or GFS parallel show further to the north, and then something of more what the icon showed, where it's a very strong system and kind of will take a more coastal low or more inland low and drop a lot of snow for these locations. It's something to watch for. But again, it's looking as if these areas will be seeing the snow, and there's a pretty good chance of them seeing some snow. Again, the snow at this point doesn't seem too heavy. If I were to look at the total snowfall, it may look heavy in some locations because of the nature of these models that show it heavier being that far out. Notice you can see up to a foot of snow potentially across some of these locations. The Texas, Dallas, Panhandle. But again, this is something to watch for and not get too excited for at this point, but something definitely to watch for. I do want to say that there is a lot of, kind of guidance towards a more active pattern in the long range. And you may be wondering, oh, well, how do I know this? Well, taking a look at some oscillations, or some teleconnections. So notice what we have is the NAO, right? The NAO usually, well, I'll show you. Right there's that forecast. It's negative. It will most likely remain negative. Maybe a slight turn towards positive, but still remaining negative. Heading towards a positive, maybe. But the NAO, right? Negative Arctic Oscillation. When it's negative, this is what it does. You can see very cold air across the United States. Warm blocking across just south of Alaska. Warm blocking just across Greenland. So we have these two high pressures, and that kind of forces this air to kind of swift down into the United States. Now, what does that mean? Well, Alberta clippers are increased, nor'easters are increased, cold air is increased, and potentially just storm systems are increased across the Central Plains and Midwest, as written down right there. So that's what we have right. That's what we have according to the NAO. Again, it is a negative right now, but we're not seeing that because this is just one piece of many things, right? So you can't just look at the NAO and be like, oh, we're definitely going to see that. With the NAO, we would, see that pattern, right? So keep that in mind, but we have other teleconnections to look at. The AO, Arctic Oscillation. It is negative, pretty well negative, and we'll just have to see what it does in the future. Notice, it's trending towards positive, but it stays negative for the next 15 days. So what does a negative AO mean? Well, a negative AO, Arctic Oscillation, sorry, did I just show you? I just switched those two things around. So I was just showing you the negative NAO. The negative NAO actually something like this, relatively similar. We have a blocking air mass across Greenland and Alaska, and cold air gets shifted further to the south. Mainly a bit, the main difference is that it's a bit centered across the eastern United States, the NAO, versus the negative AO, which we have right now, is this, which I just showed you, which is a bit more broad and could be a bit more exciting, if you will. So again, those two things are pointing for some colder air, right? But it's not in place. We're not seeing that, again, because these are just a few pieces of the puzzle. The PNA is a positive right now, tending towards negative, but generally still staying positive. So what does that mean? Well, the PNA, if I were to find it, you can see right there. We have a positive PNA, so this is what it favors. Cool air across the south and east, maybe. Warmer towards the north and northwest, and cooler across the Alaskan area. So let's just take a look at the GEFS ensembles and take a look at GEFS and take a look at, say, North America or even the Northern Hemisphere. Let's stick to North America. So this is the GEFS. Let's go back to the model run priors. That's the full one loaded. Again, right now it's kind of a combination. We see, again, cooler water here, which is good for that PNA. For that, I think it was a negative PNA, but it's kind of a disorganized pattern. It's in the midst of several phases. It's really going through like a transition. But as we push this forward, what we see is a blocking across Greenland, right? We do see cold air across the Alaskan Heights, or across the Aleutian Islands, sorry. And again, if we were to take a look back at this, that doesn't really support the negative NAO because that is warm. And what we have there is below average heights. It does support the warmer air here, which if you were to look back at the GFS, it does keep the warmer air there. But again, there's not really any cold air across the United States with this. It's pretty limited. Now, if you were to take a look at the PNA, again, it doesn't really support the PNA either that well. Maybe a bit more. You can see cool air here and the cool air across the southeast, and that seems to be a bit more accurate. But what we start seeing is this warm air mass starting to build pretty intensely. And what we start seeing is a ridge right here, so that would provide cold air across the eastern United States. We do have a blocking pattern here, and again, that seems more of what's possible. We see very warm air here, cool air here, and warm air across the Pacific United States, which really holds true, and a bit of some cooler air up Again, much further to the west this time than previously, which was further across British Columbia. Now it's further to the west. So that would provide cooler air for the United States. And notice that, again, that seems to be the trend. We start seeing that, and it actually sticks together pretty well. We do start seeing this warmer or these cooler, these below average heights push towards the west. And this remains above average. You can see it's pretty dominant. We do start seeing a bit of a break of a pattern. Probably that is usually the case. We don't see a pattern hold for much. But again, the GFS ensembles continue showing that, and it's backing towards the west. And if you're to look at taking a look at this, the Aleutian polar vortex is located further to the west. And with this, that's what we see. The trend gets further to the west. We see more cooler air across the central and eastern United States. Warmer across the really south of Alaska and into Alaska, which isn't really a classic La Nina pattern, but again, this winter has been kind of odd. The only thing with the La Nina is the extreme activity we've been seeing. And notice that this is what the GFS ensembles show, so this isn't just one model. If we were to take a look at just the heights, this could give us a better view. Honestly, it's a bit more clear what we are seeing. Again, right now, nothing really significant. Let's wait for this to load. The cold air is way further to the north, but what we start seeing is a blocking right here. Notice that warm air starts rising further and further towards the Pacific Northwest. We start seeing in return, in exchange, this cold air dive from the southern United States. Notice, starts making that southern trend. Now, with this model, it's not that clear with the GFS, but the GFS model by itself shows that pretty clearly in its 12Z model run. Notice, what we start seeing is let's go back a bit further. Pretty warm air, right? We start seeing those heights growing, and we see the cold air getting pushed down pretty far to the south. Now, it's not a bitter Arctic air mass, but it's definitely one of the colder ones we've seen. You can see that then it starts becoming more zonal for a brief while, but really, relatively, the cool air is kind of much more present than what we're seeing right now. So I don't think it will be a classic NAO pattern, right? But we're seeing slightly some more characteristics of this EPO ridge rising, this really Canadian high, or sorry, this Greenland high also getting pretty strong. So that would obviously push this cold air to the south. Again, that may be a bit unclear at this point. It's kind of fuzzy, but we'll just have to monitor for it. This is the GFS latest model run, and notice that, again, very warm air, or relatively warm air for January right now. Not a heat wave, but nothing too cold either. And then again, we start seeing those rising highs. Look, all the way into California. That pushes some of that cold air pretty well into the United States. You can see this model run of the GFS is more advocating for this. So it has been a trend for sure. And then kind of moderating things a bit, but definitely still looming much further to the south than what they have been over the past several days, which has been reserved way across the north. So we'll have to see, but for now, that is basically it. I just want to say that the pattern may be getting active, more stormy. Right now, there's a bit of a calm pattern going on, but that most likely won't last. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you all guys on the next episode. See ya. Bye.